When my family first moved back from Florida, I was about 3.5 or 4 years old. And we moved over on a farm by St. Paul Church, which was a colored people's church. Everybody had their own churches and things. And that's the last time that I ever remember my sister Opal being home. She was grown up, but she had a little smart mouth, and she talked back to my mother, and I remember my mother chasing her around the well that was out in the backyard because she had said a little bad word. Chasing her, she had a piece of stove wood in her hand. If she'd have hit her with that, it'd been rough. But I don't think she ever caught her. But I know from there also we had a farm, and then we had a small little grocery store with about one gas tank or something on it, down from a few miles from there on the main Highway 31. And I just remember visiting Aunt Mary, we called her, that lived by the church, and she was midwife. We used to visit her, and she'd have delicious food, some kind of good old country vegetables cooking, and her house was so clean. But I remember it was wallpapered with newspaper. So I guess this was all she could afford to keep the wind out of the cracks, because they kind of had to live the best they could. That was not too far from where we had lived before. It was near Oak Grove Church in Alabama. That was when we moved back after I was born, about 41, or I was born in 38. So I like I say, I have thought back, and I think I was about 3.5 to 4.5 years old. I know I was young after I had counted up to the other homes that we'd been in and some of the things that happened there. My oldest sister was 17 years older, Sarah. And then the next sister was Opal. She was about 2 or 2.5 years younger. And then my brother Buddy, the one that passed away when he was 23, was next down the line. And there usually was about probably 2, 3, 4 years old between most of them. And then my sister Dot, the one that always lived in Alabama. She never moved away from the state or anything. And then Charles, and he was 2 years older than I am. And he's the one that is the only sibling I have left living. He's in Georgia, and he always called me his older sister. My birthday's January the 13th, and his is February the 13th. He's 2 years older than I am. But I always let him do it because he looks still like a young guy, good-looking feller. But we used to be fighters when we were young. But the last baby was 7 years after I was born. I was a baby for quite a while. And Aunt Mary that I had mentioned that lived by that church, the midwife, we were sent up to our neighbor's house the night he was born. When we came back home, he was laying in Mama's arms on the bed, but she had his face kind of shadowed with the quilt to keep the light out of his face. And he looked real dark, and apparently it was from the shadow. And I asked my mother, and I says, "Mama, did she bring you a Negro baby?" Because I wasn't sure. I had no idea how babies were born or anything. But anyway, everybody got a laugh about it, and I was about 6 or 7. I would have to think in there. But anyway, he became Daddy's pet. If Vicky got hurt because I was watching him, I would get the spanking. And Vic, just everything he wanted, he did. He was spoiled. And I'll never forget a trip he went with Daddy to Birmingham to the vegetable market. He would go and pick up some stuff and take it out into the different communities, and he was a fruit and vegetable peddler. And he took Vic with him that one day. And I remember when we heard the truck coming down the road, they usually always had a little rattle to them. When it came down the road, there was a bell ringing. And when they got close enough to the house, we saw that it was Vic. Daddy had set him in the back of the truck and had him sitting in a little red fire engine. And he's pulling the bells. And Daddy had bought him a fire engine while he was out. He was probably about 4 then. When he got home, of course, I had to push him in it most of the time because our yard was sand and he couldn't pedal it. And the road was a dirt road. So unless the road had dried out from a good rain and it was kind of hard, he couldn't pedal it on there. So, but he had fun with it. Like I say, we did a lot of pushing, but he was little spoiled Vic. I had rollers in my hair, girls.
Bring them in.
You do?
What's that on your head, Ron?
It was a hospital thing.
It's a nurse's cap.
Probably what I got for a gift.
A doctor's cap
Right.
or something.
What are you saying?
Read her lips.
I can't.
Saying, Ron, take off that cap. It makes you look like a fancy boy.
Like cake boy.
There.
There's Dad. Uncle Art.
Uncle Art.
That's who?
Uncle Art.
That's Uncle.
That's Aunt Ope's.
That's Mom.
That's Mom, but Aunt Ope's Billy.
He's got one of them funky
That's
cats.
Uncle
He was
Norman's
something else.
son. Oh, he was.
Oh, remember those old milk cartons?
Aunt
Now,
Joanne.
did they have the big?
That's Aunt
Opal
Ope.
right there.
Oh, yeah.
I used to cook different things at dinner, and like I say, the way I learned to cook a lot of things, I just thought of something that might sound good, and I tried it. Back then, we ate a lot of Spam, but we usually just opened it up and made sandwiches out of it. But this one night, I said, I'm going to make a nice dinner, something we've never had, and I took a can of that Spam, and I split it in serving pieces and put a onion slice in between and put ketchup over it, and I put it in the oven and baked it. And I made a nice vegetable, and you always had some kind of potatoes. And they just raved over that good food that I'd made that night. It looked good. I always tried to make food look good, no matter what it was. That was one good thing. But then another night, we had some chickens running around, and I said, I'm going to cook a chicken tonight. I'd never dressed a chicken or cooked it like that. I'd always watch her cook it and stuff. And we had this big, huge weeping willow in the backyard. We had 2 of them, but one of them was right at the corner of the yard. And the willow branches just swept the ground as the wind blew. So I got out there and I started running that chicken. Had to catch it first and then wring its neck. So I ran it, and it would run around that willow tree, and then I'd turn back around to try to face it, and it'd turn around and run again. I must have went around about 4 or 5 times by that willow, and I thought, I can't catch a chicken like this. So I looked up by the porch, and there was a fishing cane pole sitting up against the porch. And I took that cane, I says, I'll get that chicken yet. And I snuck around and met him head on, coming around that willow tree. And I knocked him out with that cane. And I don't know how I went through this, but I did. Then I had to wring its neck to kill it. I did knock him out, but I did have to completely kill it. And that was the first time I'd ever heard a chicken neck or wrung a chicken neck to kill it. That was rough. But then, of course, you had to put them in hot water, which I had burning out in the pot outside, and stick it in there so I could pick all the feathers off of him, and then have to clean him inside. That was the worst, one of the worst things I've ever done. But I was bound and determined to cook some good chicken. Well, I went ahead and did the whole thing, cut it up and into pieces, and it was cut right, and had all the feathers off of him, and washed him up again good, and fried it, and breaded it like she always did. And it was finished, and we had the mashed potatoes and gravy and vegetables. We always had fresh vegetables. And had a delicious-looking supper fixed when she got home. And she just couldn't believe how pretty the chicken looked. And how good it looked and everything, and what a good job I had done. But my stomach was just turning, and I couldn't eat a bite of that chicken. So her and Vic ate the whole chicken, or had leftovers, but they ate. And they said it was delicious. It was pretty, because you always got that real crisp brown mix on them. But I had to be about 12, 13. I was the girl of the house. Yeah, I did everything that, I was supposed to. And like I say, I never killed another chicken. If I had chicken, I bought it or whatever. But I can say I wrung one's neck. That's a bad way to do it, but I've seen my mother do them so much, especially every Sunday we had chicken. And then she'd invite the preacher down for dinner, and me and Charles used to get so mad because if you had company back in those days, at that age, if there wasn't enough chairs, you waited for a place, and the grown-ups ate first. So they would eat the best breast, chicken legs, all of that stuff, leave the backs, and the bony pieces for us kids. And me and Charles used to say, we hope Mama don't invite the preacher to the house for But most of the times they'd go to the house for dinner. Because our preachers used to travel most of the time from Birmingham, for the weekend. And so people had to feed them. But Mama was the one that just always had she had somebody in the house all the time if she could. So anyway, I don't think to this day I could ever dress another chicken.
Me and Grams.
Yes, ma'am.
Grandma, you think we can slow dance at the wedding?
Yeah, if you can keep up with me.
I wanna tell the whole thing upside down. I'll find the things they say just can't be.
Break it down, Grams. Get low. Get low.
So I talked to him. And here's that.
We went to
Sarah.
the yard.
Look at that
Met
dress.
him.
Now see the pipe. That was from the stove. It was a vent from the stove on 4th Avenue.
66 4th Avenue.
Yeah, that's how you vented out the stove.
Well, that's when everything. Then the older apartments.
Look at them fingernails.
Look at the ties.
Yeah.
I mean, just the fact that they just thought
Well, this
you're
is in
wearing
the
ties on
Yeah.
Thanksgiving dinner.
This is in the 60s.
Yeah, that was the style.
That was the style.
I can
Look at her
guarantee you,
hair.
though, by the end of that evening,
Look
that
at
tie
Al's
was off.
hair.
It was wrapped around his leg or something.
Hair.
Yeah.
Look at Aunt Opal's hair there.
Why?
It was like,
Getting on Uncle Bucky's nose.
Kill the fly.
Yeah.
I'm not stealing
Don't
it.
shoot the fly. Kill the fly.
It's like,
Yeah, see, I never got to sit down. I cooked and I served and
Still
I
that
did
way,
this.
isn't John Microwave house is still that same way.
boy, put on that
See,
gravy, Uncle Bucky.
Oh, that's right.
That's what I mean. Go get fat, boy.
Go to the back room and chow this down and get some more.
My goodness, what a plate, Ron.
you see, the kids never got to sit at the
Everybody's
table. We always shoot off.
See,
to
the hot water heater was sitting in the kitchen too, in the
Oh,
corner.
they're
In the
smoking.
corner.
They're
How many
all
cigarettes
smoking
go on
this
there? There's
Everyone
1, 2
knows.
cigarettes.
Putting out her
Party
lips.
tonight.
Anna just got done eating.
After moving from over by the church, we moved way down in the woods, down by the railroad track, and Daddy farmed in there. Yeah, I started to school when we lived there, first grade. And we used, we didn't have electricity, no indoor plumbing. It was still a country place. But you always smelled those fresh sweet potatoes and delicious vegetables and things that Mama was cooking on the stove after she had done work in the fields. And the kids all helped. Well, I didn't do anything then because I was too young to do anything. But I remember one night we were doing our homework. I was probably trying to learn my ABCs or something. We were sitting in the floor in front of because we had a lamp that burned oil. And I had long blonde hair, and I bent over a little too far, and my hair caught fire from the lamp. So we had some scrambling there to get my hair put out. It really wasn't bad because just when it did, it just on the end of it, but it was long enough that they caught it before, because Dot and Charles was sitting on the floor with me too. So they saw it, got it right away. But that's not the first time. Somebody always was singeing hair or something around there when you got too close to the lamps. But it was when I had just started school and you had to be 6. I can't remember how long we lived there, but all of a sudden we were going to move again. And we moved back up the road up into where there was a lot of homes around and farms, and it was smaller farms, so you could see a lot of our homes, that was around. And we had a house that was real close that had kids, and we moved there. And I'll never forget the day after we moved there that we got our first electricity. They came and put the wire right in the middle of the ceiling with the string on it to turn it on and off. It was really a treat then. We had electricity.
White. Pretty mommy.
The moo-moo dresses was in style then. I made a bunch of moo-moo dresses.
Moo-moo dresses.
Wow.
Well,
There you go.
I didn't know I was in
that's
the
Miss
eating
Priss.
contest.
Oh, there
Oh my gosh. Turn it off. Kids, turn.
What a shirt.
With wallpaper.
That was
Again,
like,
from the Herb Tarley collection. WKR. Whoa, now there's another shirt.
You are loud.
figure out what year this was.
Mom, when I was 10, how old were
It'd
you?
be 70s, wouldn't it? 70.
First guitar?
That was my first
born
guitar.
66.
68. That'd be 68.
This is Hawthorne. Oh, I remember saying, "Ma, keep the camera still, and then I'll just change the instrument."
Today.
Just chilling with Grams.
Oh, no,
Smile,
no.
just smile.
Wait a minute. Let me
Oh.
get my clothes on.
Oh, sorry. Oh, jeez. Grams, I would.